If you think the history of the United States is a simple, straight line from A to B, well, think again. Its story wasn't just written, it was hammered out in a relentless cycle of conflict and compromise. Today, we're going to dive into how those exact moments of struggle and resolution really shaped the nation we know. So, let's start with a big question. How is a nation really born? Does it just spring into existence on a single day with a fancy declaration? Or is it something that's forged over centuries, in the fire of brutal struggles and really hard-won compromises? As we're about to see, for the United States, the answer is all about the ongoing conflict that has defined its very identity.
All right, so our story actually starts long before 1776. We have to go back to a continent that was anything but empty. It was a stage already set for a massive collision of worlds, where hundreds of established societies met new arrivals, and that sparked the very first of many, many conflicts.
Yeah, the arrival of Europeans wasn't some one-and-done event. It was more like a slow, overlapping invasion that took place over 600 years. You had the Spanish, the English, the French, the Dutch. They were all racing to claim territory, and in the process, they turned North America into a battlefield for their own competing ambitions.
First contact with the hundreds of Native American nations already living there was, well, it was a really complex mix of cooperation and complete catastrophe. On one hand, sure, there was trade, an exchange of knowledge. But on the other, Europeans brought devastating diseases that just wiped out entire populations. That, combined with violent clashes over land, set a truly tragic pattern for the centuries that would follow.
But the conflicts weren't just with outsiders. Oh no. Pretty soon, the fight turned inward. After the American colonists helped Great Britain defeat France in a very costly war, they suddenly found themselves in a brand new struggle. And this time, it was against their own mother country.
To pay off its massive war debt, Britain started imposing a whole series of taxes on the colonies. But for the colonists, this wasn't just about the money, it was about a core principle: no taxation without representation. From the Stamp Act to the Boston Tea Party, every new tax, every protest, was another step on the road to revolution. It was pushing both sides right to the breaking point.
And this is the moment where everything changes. The Declaration of Independence took what was a rebellion over taxes and turned it into a full-blown revolution for human liberty. This was a radical idea, this assertion of universal rights, and it gave the war a profound new meaning. It would go on to inspire struggles for freedom all over the world.
So you win the war, great, but the new nation almost immediately fell apart. Its first attempt at a government, the Articles of Confederation, was just way too weak. It couldn't manage the country's debt, it couldn't stop states from fighting with each other. Things got so bad that an uprising of indebted farmers, known as Shays' Rebellion, made it crystal clear a change was needed, and fast. The result was the Constitution. A really hard-fought compromise that created a much stronger federal government. But it also lit the fuse on a fierce debate about states' rights that, you could argue, is still going on today.
With a new government locked in, the United States turned its eyes westward. This next era was defined by two powerful and ultimately clashing forces: this relentless push for expansion and the institution of slavery that was threatening to tear the young country in two.
What was the fuel for all this? Well, it was this powerful and, let's be honest, pretty controversial idea called manifest destiny. This was the belief that Americans had a God-given right to the entire continent. And this idea was used to justify just about everything: the forced removal of Native American tribes, a war with Mexico, and the push to stretch the nation's borders from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific.
And the pace of this expansion was just staggering. In less than 50 years, the country more than doubled in size. But every new piece of territory came with this one single explosive question: would it be a free state or a slave state?
For decades, the nation was basically held together with duct tape and wishful thinking, a series of fragile political compromises. These were really just band-aids designed to keep a shaky balance of power in Congress. But they were always doomed to fail because they tried to treat a fundamental moral evil, slavery, as if it were just a political problem to be managed. They never solved the core conflict, they just kept kicking the can down the road.
And here, this is where the can finally hits a wall. The decades of compromises just completely failed.
After Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860, a man who opposed the expansion of slavery, Southern states started leaving the Union, and the nation plunged headfirst into its deadliest conflict ever.
This was the spark that lit the fuse. When Confederate forces fired on that federal fort, it was an undeniable act of open rebellion. In the North, it created this massive surge of patriotism, a call to preserve the Union at all costs. In the South, it solidified their decision to fight for independence. There was absolutely no turning back.
I want you to just let this number sink in for a second. About 620,000 soldiers died. That's more than in all other American wars combined. It was a staggering, brutal price to pay to decide two fundamental questions. Would the nation stay in one piece, and would it finally get rid of the institution of slavery? But out of all that terrible conflict came something truly revolutionary. In the Constitution itself, the 13th Amendment ended slavery. The 14th defined what it meant to be a citizen and guaranteed equal protection under the law. And the 15th said that the right to vote couldn't be denied based on race. Together, these were a promise of a new birth of freedom. But, winning the war is one thing. Winning the peace, that's a whole different ballgame. The period right after the war, which we call Reconstruction, was this brief, chaotic, and ultimately tragic attempt to remake the South and actually fulfill the promises of those new amendments. And it all came crashing down with a shady backroom political deal. To settle a really contested presidential election, the Republican candidate was basically given the White House. And what was the price? He had to agree to pull the last federal troops out of the South, which effectively meant the federal government was abandoning its role in protecting the rights of African Americans.
The change was just swift and devastating. As soon as the federal troops were gone, the old Southern power structures took back control. All the political gains that African Americans had made were systematically dismantled through violence, through intimidation, and through the creation of Jim Crow laws. It led to nearly another 100 years of racial segregation and disenfranchisement.
So the end of Reconstruction wasn't really an end to conflict. It was just a shift. The unresolved questions of race and equality would keep simmering under the surface, while brand new battles over industrialization, wealth inequality, and America's role on the world stage were just getting started. The nation, forged in conflict, was simply entering its next chapter.